All right, coming up on this episode of Watch Culture, we're going to be discussing 2018 movie Isle of Dogs, the new latest and greatest from Wes Anderson, and it's going to be a really fun episode, so you're going to want to check this one out. All right, we're back for another episode of Watch Culture, the show where we give you recommendations about movies you should be watching. Today we're talking about 2018 movie called Isle of Dogs. It's a Wes Anderson movie, and if you are familiar with Wes Anderson's work, you'll know that he has a very stylized technique. He builds what a lot of reviewers call micro worlds, where you can actually see sets within sets, and there's even color palettes that are used frequently throughout his films. His characters are very intelligent, stylized people. There's a lot of examples of this. I think I can articulate it best by showing how he actually has a lot of actors he uses frequently. So what I mean by this is that you can actually see that he collaborates with a lot of specific actors over and over again. So Frances McDormand, or with Bill Murray, or with Edward Norton, or with the Wilson brothers, Luke and Owen. He also likes to use Jason Schwartzman in a lot of his films. Willem Dafoe. You can see Greta Gerwig, and you can see Scarlett Johansson. It's just something that that Wes Anderson does because he's actually trying to create these stylized worlds because he wants to tell a broader story within the story. And he even uses foreshadowing devices by having little micro plays inside of his films. So a good example is Moonrise Kingdom, where the prediction of the island flooding happens in the flooding of the scout camp. What I personally really like about Wes Anderson films, and we can talk about this a bit more in our Grand Budapest review that I did with Mike, is that they're just visually stunning films. They're really enjoyable to watch and take in as a creative person. That said, Isle of Dogs is not his most visually striking movie to date. And I think that's intentional because with his last film, Grand Budapest, it actually kind of went a little bit too far to the other side of the spectrum. And I love that movie, so don't think that this means that I love Isle of Dogs more or less. It's just different. Isle of Dogs has a great cast, though. We have Bryan Cranston in the lead role as Chief, and also Koyu Rankin as Atari Kobayashi. You also see Edward Norton, as I mentioned, is in this film. He plays Rex, and Jeff Goldblum plays Duke. Bill Murray is Boss, and Bob Balaban is King. And I also mentioned Scarlett Johansson. She plays the Nutmeg. All of these characters in the film are actually dogs, with the exception of Koyu Rankin. He is a little boy, a 12-year-old boy, who's actually the ward of his uncle, Mayor Kobayashi. And there's a great mechanization in the plot in that it's not just about the story unfolding with the dogs being trapped on the island because of the illness that all these dogs have been inflicted with. It's actually socioeconomic needs of the city to try and kind of like move things around and to get things in place so that they can continue to have power, because all the people in these prominent roles are actually part of this clan that was affiliated with cats much further in the past. And the movie's actually, this is the first time ever, but this movie's actually set in the future, and it's really interesting because it's a fictional city in Japan in the future where dogs have become very dangerous to be around because they have all these illnesses. And incidentally, within the context of the story, the dogs actually make it seem as if a lot of time has passed, but it's because dogs live in greater year spans than humans. So it's, it might be over the course of a couple of years, but for the dogs it's been like many, many years, and that's kind of a cute little joke that's played off well. I also really like the fact that the story kind of pulls you into the world of the dogs. So the character of Chief is sort of like this leader of misfit dogs, you know, who he doesn't want to be around humans, but over the course of the movie, he kind of learns to accept that loving humans isn't the worst thing that he could do. And he there's actually an allusion to another story called Harry the Dirty Dog, where children clean up dogs that are strays and have been, covered in mud to find their original dogs. And what we find out is that, I don't want to ruin the movie, but that the Chief isn't so far removed from the other well-to-do dogs, like Spots, for instance, who is Atari's dog. I mentioned Akira, that was a slip, I did that by accident, but there's actually influences from Akira Kurosawa in Seven Samurai throughout the movie. Like, for instance, Kikyocho features in the Kikyocho residence in the movie, so that's an allusion to one of the samurai, Kikyocho. Additionally, there's also allusions to the stop-motion works of the Rankin Bass Christmas specials. So we got the Akira Kurosawa references, and we got the Rankin Bass Christmas special references. So we get this really interesting mix of Japanese culture and Western culture. I also think that, I was struggling with this for a while, but I actually think it's really interesting that the dogs all speak American English, while the other actors who play humans, for the most part, except for Greta Gerwig's character, who's like this foreign exchange student who's English, they all speak Japanese, and then the dogs speak English, and they've been like translated, and it's a cutesy thing. And, I've heard mixed reviews on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, if it's cultural appropriation. I think I'm actually in the camp that it's a Wes Anderson movie that is not appropriating Japanese culture, but finding a way to collaborate with it. And I think that's probably a really good thing, because you'll see how other cultures kind of appropriate Western cultures because they've been assimilated by it. I think in this case it's actually good that Wes Anderson is trying to reference those cultures without taking over and casting, American characters to play Japanese people. The American actors playing Japanese dogs is kind of weird, but I think it's a way to allow him to continue to build his narrative of the character actors that he's used in previous films, like I mentioned. It's also really neat that all the dogs' wool is made out of like alpaca wool, which is very similar to like that Rankin Bass Christmas specials. And I think that the film itself has a really fun name. Like, it's called Isle of Dogs, which is a play on words of I love dogs. And as always, the story just pulls you in. So take a chance to check out Isle of Dogs. It might not be Wes Anderson's most exciting work ever, and maybe we're at that point now where he's kind of reached critical mass and we're just kind of like over him as a culture, but I think he's making really good films still, and Isle of Dogs is definitely in there, and it's interesting to see how he's evolved past the Fantastic Mr. Fox movie. And if you want to see other animated movies that are kind of in line with this but are for kids, you could check out Box Trolls. You could check out 101 Dalmatians, which I know it's kind of weird, but that's a good movie about dogs. Bolt, and The Plague Dogs, which is like really interesting animation. So that said, I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope you check out Isle of Dogs. This has been Watch Culture. Hit the bell for notifications. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we've got more movie reviews coming a few days a week, so check them out. So, did anybody else notice this color palette? Gray, red, and then 2 shades of brown, or a taupe if you want to call it that. Brown, and then a dark brown. So it's pretty dark, but actually features really well on the cover art of the box art of the movie.